Hello and welcome to a fine Tuesday Tea-ology. It's been a couple weeks. I was down in Bolivia where they introduced me to a tea drink called mate. Very sweet and minty. Interesting, but it did not woo me away from my strong black teas. But then there and then recovering from that trip. But now we're back on a drizzly, rainy, cool day, perfect for a cup of tea and a little time thinking about the wonder of the person of Jesus Christ. For that is where we have come to. For those who've been following along with us, if you remember, we were talking about the significance of Christ. We have been following the preparation for the coming of Christ in the law and the prophets and the mighty saving works of God as he is drawing a people to himself, and all of this leading to the climax of the work of Christ, who would do the true work of dealing with the problem of sin and Satan and of bringing redemption and life to all those who will have it, all those who will receive this gift that God has given in Jesus Christ. And talking about the coming of Christ, we looked at the Gospel of John, where it starts with the pre-existence of the second person of the Trinity. And when we talk about Jesus Christ, we are talking about an eternal person, not just a human being, but the Son of God from all eternity who became man. And so we began with that note, the divinity of Christ, that this is the second person of the Trinity, that in the beginning was the Word, and through him all things were made. He is not among the creatures, but he's God. So in that basic division of existence between God and not God, he's God. But he has become man, and this brings us to the wonderful mystery of Christ, the mystery of the incarnation. So when you read the Gospel of John, chapter 1, when you get down to verse 14, you read, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth." So we talked about the pre-existence of Christ. We talked about the basic fact of the incarnation. The Son became man. And today, I want to emphasize the humanity of Christ. That when it says, "the Word became flesh," that is a statement we need to take very seriously in all of its mystery and wonder. That what we are talking about is that God the Son, the person of the second person of the Trinity, the person of the Son, having a fully divine nature, also added to himself a human nature, such that Jesus Christ is one person, fully God and fully man. And the big theological term for this is the hypostatic union. In the one person of Christ, there is a union of these two natures, but not a mixing of them. So there are certain things that when we're thinking about Christ, we need to rule out. We rule out any idea that he was half and half. It's natural for us to think that way because having only one nature, we think in terms of one nature. So it's like, okay, well, half God and half man, and that fits with a lot of our fiction, our fantasy. Whether going back to the ancient Greek and Roman legends where they had what were called demigods. Like if you've studied Greek and Roman mythology and you've heard of Hercules, Hercules is a demigod. He's half God, half man. No, that's not it. That's not what we're saying we're talking about. We see that in fiction with other alien races or whatever, this idea of merging and half. And there is, of course, uh, this reality in our thoughts in fiction, and of course there's a certain degree in which in the animal world you can crossbreed, and emerge with these half and half creatures that have crossbred from two species, but that is not what we are talking about when we are talking about the coming of Christ. We're not talking about one person who was half God and half man. We're talking about the person of Jesus Christ who is fully God and fully man. But nor is it a merging of these two natures to create a sort of third special nature there. No, there remains a distinction, a distinction. One person with two natures. And we need to preserve the reality of the fullness of the divinity and the humanity of Christ when we think about him, if we are to have a proper understanding of who he is and what he has done. And so we've mentioned already uh, that in history, of course, this is has been hard sometimes for people to do, and so they minimize one side of things, and so the trend, especially in our day, in modern times, would be to reduce Jesus to something less than fully God. And of course, the secularists, do this. They accept that Jesus it was a man, most of them, but they say just a man. They uh, they reject his divinity wholesale because they regard that as a myth. But it's also the case that throughout Christian history, certain heretical groups have rejected the fullness of the deity of Christ and have thought of him as a very exalted creature. And so in ancient times, there was a group called the Arians, Arians, the Aryans, not to be confused with the ethnic Aryans, Aryans. But the ancient Aryans regarded Jesus as the most exalted of all creatures. And there is modern Arianism, in formally speaking, in the Jehovah's Witnesses, are modern day Aryans who reject the divinity of Christ. And it may well be that many who claim to be Christians actually partake of this heresy. Because unfortunately, on a popular level, our theology is very weak. So we want to affirm the full divinity. Jesus is truly God. But you can err on the other side, that is, by rejecting his full humanity. And this, formally speaking, this is more an ancient problem than a modern one. Again, because, the modern world is very materialistic, and so we have a much easier time of thinking of Jesus as a man. And our supernatural perspective is often weakened, especially in the secular world. Uh, but in ancient times, they had a very strong supernatural perspective, and this statement here from John chapter 1 verse 14, the word became flesh, is a statement that would have struck them as very challenging, because the idea of God becoming flesh seemed to them uh, disgraceful, an idea unworthy of God. There was a tendency to have a hierarchy of thought where spirit stood in this place above matter, and where matter, even in this hierarchy, would be regarded as evil. That matter, in some of their perspectives, this idea that matter was sort of created by an evil god, and the spirit world by a spirit god, and the goal is to escape from matter. And so there could be a whole different idea of creation underlying this in their perspective. And so this idea of God becoming man, that seemed so unworthy of God. No, that couldn't be true. And so there was an idea that we've come to refer to as Docetism, Docetism, but the C is pronounced like an S there, a Docetism, uh, or a Docetic idea about Jesus Christ would say that he only appeared to be human. He looked human, but actually was just God. And this denies the real humanity of Christ. Why does this matter? Because if you've been following, I hope I haven't lost you. It all may seem very abstract and puzzling and just heady, and we're talking ancient history. Well, once again, we do live in a materialistic time, but also there is a resurgence of very Gnostic ideas of the unimportance of the body and stuff, and really the spirit, elevation of the spirit and denigration of the body. That paradoxically has a resurgence in modern times. And ideas that Jesus was not fully human can also just come from a tremendous respect for God, because it ought to be astounding to read this statement: the Word became flesh. Not because matter is bad. No, God created this world and it's good, but because God is so exalted, it is a tremendous statement of the wonderful depths of God's love. It is overwhelming. And so it is a challenge. It is a challenge to faith to believe that this is really true, that Jesus really is fully man. But it is essential at the same time. uh, the incarnation, the coming into the flesh of the second person of the Trinity, the coming of the Son of God as man, was the whole plan. And without that, he can't be our substitute. That was the whole point, was that he as man was to live and die and rise in our place and for us. And so that we, by faith in him, by union with him, by faith, could receive the wonderful blessings that he has won in his life, death, and resurrection. If Jesus is not fully man, then his victory over Satan and the demons is the victory of God over them, which always, of course, is assured, but it is not a reversal of the defeat that man suffered in Eden when Satan, in his temptation, drew Adam and Eve away from God. If he is not fully man, then his death on the cross is not the death of someone who could justly be a substitute for mankind. If he is not fully man, then how does his resurrection, how does that even work? For only a creature can die and rise. God is immortal. And so it is as man, fully God and fully man, that he has come to do his work, and that his work was effective for God's saving purpose. So if we lose the humanity of Christ, we lose the gospel. All of this to say that these battles, these theological battles, were fought in ancient times, and we need to hold on to the fruits of the hard-thinking and faithful passing down of the truth of the Christian church from the New Testament times until now, and affirm joyfully the full divinity and full humanity of Christ, the wonderful miracle of the humbling of the Son of God to become truly one of us for our salvation, and that by faith in Him we can walk with Him and know Him, know the forgiveness, the life, the adoption, and the joy that comes from our gracious God. Well, may the Lord bless you. Enjoy your tea. Stay warm and dry if you can. And we will see you again. God bless.